The story begins with a young woman named Millie arriving at a sprawling, prestigious estate for a maid interview, carrying the weight of a college degree that has proven useless in her current circumstances. She meets Nenah, the elegant but seemingly high-strung mistress of the house, who explains that the position is live-in and requires absolute dedication to the upkeep of their home. Nenah reveals she is expecting a baby and wants to keep the news a secret from her husband, Andrew, until she is further along in the pregnancy. During the tour, Nenah shows Millie a cramped, isolated attic bedroom that will serve as her living quarters, a room that feels strangely disconnected from the luxury of the floors below. Before Millie departs, Nenah hands her cash for gas and her time, though Millie leaves feeling certain that a simple background check into her criminal past will disqualify her immediately. She spends the night sleeping in her car, only to be startled awake by a police officer the next morning, but the tension dissolves when Nenah calls to offer her the job. This unexpected stroke of luck feels like a lifeline, and Millie quickly accepts, unaware that she is stepping into a meticulously crafted trap designed by a woman far more desperate than herself. Inside, the house is a chaotic mess of discarded clothes and dishes, a sharp contrast to the pristine image Nenah projected during the initial interview. Nenah explains she is overwhelmed by a speech she must write for a public appearance and retreats upstairs, leaving Millie to spend the night scrubbing the entire residence from top to bottom. When Andrew and his young daughter, Cease, finally return home, Andrew appears genuinely startled by Millie's presence, suggesting a lack of communication between the couple. Millie eventually retreats to her attic room, where she notices unsettling deep scratches on the interior of the door and realizes the window has been bolted shut. When Nenah brings her dinner later that evening, Millie points out these oddities, but Nenah laughs them off as quirks of an old house, promising to have the handyman address them. Nenah then provides Millie with a dedicated phone and a credit card for household expenses, though the atmosphere of the house remains thick with an unspoken underlying dread that Millie cannot quite identify. The following morning takes a dark turn when Millie finds herself locked inside her attic room, the door seemingly jammed from the outside until it suddenly gives way. She descends the stairs to find Nenah in the midst of a terrifying emotional meltdown, frantically throwing objects and screaming about missing notes for her upcoming speech. Nenah accuses Millie of throwing the notes away, a charge Millie knows is false, yet she is forced to endure the woman's screeching rage as Andrew tries to play the peacemaker. Andrew manages to calm his wife, suggesting she go to the salon to relax while he takes Cease to school, leaving Millie to clean up the wreckage of the morning's outburst. After Nenah departs, Andrew pulls Millie aside to apologize for his wife's behavior, describing her as being on an emotional roller coaster that has become increasingly difficult to manage. Outside, Millie attempts to speak with Enzo, but the man remains cryptic, his silence speaking volumes about the danger he knows is lurking within the walls of the mansion. The tension continues to build the next day when Millie finds a mysterious pill on the bathroom floor, only for Nenah to burst in and aggressively eject her, claiming she needs privacy for a shower. Dinner time brings more friction as Andrew informs Millie that Cease is hungry, but when Millie serves the child, the young girl reacts with cold, calculated arrogance. Cease rejects a glass of juice, stating that such things are a privilege and should not be consumed from a dirty glass, mirroring a level of entitlement that feels coached. Andrew invites Millie to sit and eat with them, an offer she politely declines as she begins to feel the strange, shifting dynamics between the family members. Later that night, in the solitude of her room, Millie looks up Andrew on social media, finding herself drawn to his polished image, only for the man to suddenly appear in her room with a cupcake. They share a moment of intimacy that feels both electric and dangerous, but the scene abruptly shifts, revealing the encounter was merely a vivid dream Millie was having in the dark. The reality of the next morning is far less romantic, as Nenah hands Millie a key to the attic door and begins probing her with pointed questions about her previous night's interactions with Andrew. When Millie tries to assert a right to a scheduled day off, Nenah becomes obstructive, but Andrew intervenes and grants her permission to leave the house for several hours. Millie uses her freedom to visit a government building where she meets with her parole officer, revealing that her domestic job is a condition of her continued freedom. The officer warns her that if she loses this position or her housing, she will be sent back to prison to serve the remaining 5 years of her original sentence. This revelation clarifies Millie's desperation. She is not just working for a paycheck, she is working to stay out of a cage, making her vulnerable to any whim of her employers. While she is out, Nenah calls and demands she pick up Cease from ballet, but the instructions are intentionally vague, leading Millie on a frantic search across town. When she finally locates the studio, she is informed that Cease is actually at a friend's house for a sleepover, a fact Nenah later denies ever knowing. Back at the house, Nenah gaspiacs Millie in front of Andrew's visiting mother, painting the maid as incompetent and confused, while Millie stands by in silent, frustrated disbelief. The psychological warfare escalates as Millie realizes that Nenah is deliberately setting her up to fail, though the reason for this targeted cruelty remains hidden behind Nenah's mask of mental instability. Unable to sleep that night, Millie goes downstairs to watch television, where she is eventually joined by Andrew, who shares details about Nenah's tragic past. He claims that Nenah's parents died in a suspicious house fire when she was a child, and that many people, including the police, believed she was the one who started it. Their conversation is interrupted by Nenah, who appears in the shadows and coldly orders Andrew to bed before informing Millie that she is being fired for her inappropriate behavior. Millie is forced to beg for her job, highlighting her status as a parolee, and Nenah eventually relents, giving her 1 week to prove herself, while demanding she dress more modestly. The next day, while cleaning, Millie overhears Nenah's friends gossiping about a 9-month stint Nenah spent in a psychiatric ward, contradicting the story of her recent pregnancy and hormonal shifts. Millie begins documenting these lies in a secret diary, concluding that Nenah is truly unstable, especially after finding a stash of powerful antipsychotic medications hidden in the house. As she begins searching for a new job in secret, she is caught by Cease, who has been lurking in the shadows and monitoring Millie's every move with an eerie, adult-like focus. The power struggle within the house takes a surreal turn when Millie discovers one of her own belongings inside Cease's elaborate miniature dollhouse, suggesting the child has been sneaking into the attic. When Millie confronts her, the child's response is chillingly defiant, and the interaction is cut short by the return of the parents, who bring more unsettling news. Andrew pulls Millie aside to reveal that Nenah suffers from a medical condition that makes it impossible for her to have children, exposing her earlier claims of pregnancy as a complete fabrication. He also mentions that he is not Cease's biological father, adding another layer of complexity to the family's fractured history and his own apparent role as a long-suffering husband. That night, the sound of violent screaming erupts from the master bedroom, and Millie rushes to investigate, finding Nenah holding a bloody knife, while Andrew cringes in fear. Andrew manages to disarm his wife and locks himself away, leaving Millie to wonder if she is living in a house with a victim and a predator, or if everyone involved is hiding a darker secret. The next day, Nenah attempts to make amends by gifting Millie several expensive dresses, insisting she take them despite Millie's initial and very vocal hesitation. Nenah's behavior continues to oscillate wildly as she tasks Millie with booking a high-end hotel suite and musical tickets for a weekend getaway that Cease will not be attending. During a visit to the ballet studio, Millie speaks with another housekeeper who shares a horrifying rumor that Nenah once tried to drown Cease in a bathtub. This informant suggests that Andrew is the only reason Nenah isn't in prison or a permanent asylum, portraying him as a saintly figure who saved his daughter and protected his wife. Confused and seeking the truth, Millie confronts Enzo, who finally breaks his silence to tell her that she needs to run away from the house as fast as possible. Before she can act, Nenah discovers the theater tickets and accuses Millie of a clerical error, threatening to deduct the cost from her already meager paycheck. Andrew once again steps in to defend Millie, promising to handle the financial discrepancy and allowing Nenah to leave for the weekend with Cease as originally planned. In the quiet of the empty house, Millie takes a shower, but the peace is shattered when Andrew accidentally walks in on her, leading to a moment of intense awkward vulnerability. Andrew explains that the tickets could not be refunded and invites Millie to attend the show with him, an invitation she eventually accepts after some initial reluctance. They spend a glamorous evening in the city, and over dinner, Andrew laments his marriage, painting a picture of a man trapped by his own loyalty to a broken and abusive woman. He describes how much Nenah has changed over the years, turning from a vibrant partner into a source of constant anger and resentment, making Millie feel a deep sense of sympathy for him. After dancing together, they decide it is unsafe to drive home and check into a luxury hotel, booking separate rooms but remaining in close proximity. However, the night takes a stressful turn when Millie's phone finally charges, revealing a barrage of termination texts from a vitriolic Nenah, who has somehow tracked their location. Andrew comforts her, and the emotional intensity of the night culminates in a kiss and a subsequent morning, where they wake up in each other's arms. They rush back to the estate to beat Nenah home, but the sense of romantic escape is short-lived as they realize the walls are closing in on their illicit and dangerous new bond. The return to the house is marked by immediate tension as Nenah arrives and begins questioning Millie about her night, her tone dripping with a suspicious predatory curiosity. Nenah then drops a bombshell, revealing she knows exactly why Millie was in prison for 10 years, effectively stripping away Millie's last shred of dignity and leverage. Andrew remains silent during this interrogation, and Nenah sends Millie out on errands in the family car, a task that Millie realizes is another calculated move in a larger game. While at the store, a stranger warns Millie that her phone is likely being tracked by her employer, confirming her fears that every move she makes is being watched. Her realization comes too late, as police officers arrive to arrest her for driving a stolen vehicle, a trap Nenah set by reporting the car missing while Millie was using it. Andrew eventually secures her release, and back at the house, he finally loses his temper with Nenah, ordering her to leave the property and never return. In the heat of the argument, Nenah slaps Millie across the face before fleeing in her car, leaving Andrew and Millie alone to begin what appears to be a new life together. As they settle into their new arrangement, the facade of safety begins to crumble when Andrew fires Enzo for witnessing an accident involving his mother's heirloom china. Millie feels a mounting sense of guilt over the broken dishes, but Andrew's reaction is strangely calm, telling her he has a specialist who can repair the fragments she has saved. However, when Millie looks at Cease's dollhouse again, she begins to see patterns that mirror the layout of the real house in ways that are deeply disturbing and symbolic. Andrew finds her with the unwashed shards of china, and his demeanor shifts instantly from loving partner to cold, commanding authority figure as he leads her toward the attic. He forces her to drink champagne in the very room she once occupied as a maid, and when she wakes up, she finds the door deadbolted from the outside, just as it had been before. Andrew's voice through the door is no longer gentle. He tells her she will stay there until he decides otherwise, revealing that the cycle of domestic imprisonment is starting all over again. The scene then shifts to Nenah, who is seen laughing hysterically at the gate, her supposed breakdown revealed to be a triumphant performance of a woman who has finally escaped. The narrative pivots to reveal the true history of the marriage, showing that Andrew was the architect of every horror Nenah endured during their years together. Nenah was a self-made woman and a devoted mother who fell for Andrew's charming mask, only to find herself subjected to a regime of psychological torture and physical isolation. Andrew used the attic as a site of punishment, forcing Nenah to perform degrading tasks like plucking her own hair to prove her submission and earn the right to see her child. He staged the bathtub incident and the suicide attempt to ensure Nenah would be labeled as mentally unstable by the authorities, giving him total control over her life and assets. Nenah realized she could never escape him through legal means or by running away, so she began searching for a replacement, a woman who could draw Andrew's predatory focus away from her. She specifically chose Millie because of her criminal background and her physical resemblance to Andrew's type, knowing the man's need to be adored would eventually lead him to target the new maid. Nenah's entire crazy persona was a survival tactic, a way to keep Andrew occupied, while she slowly engineered a way for both her and Cease to be free of his shadow. Back in the present, Andrew's true cruelty is on full display as he demands Millie use the broken china to carve 21 lines into her own skin as penance for the broken dishes. He watches through a hidden camera as she suffers, but Millie's own history of trauma has made her more resilient and dangerous than he could have ever anticipated. It is revealed that Millie went to prison for killing a man who tried to assault her friend, a crime born of protection rather than malice, and she has no intention of being a victim again. She performs the gruesome task to lull him into a false sense of security, then waits for her moment to strike back against the man who thinks he has broken her. The next morning, when Andrew enters the room to offer her a life of stability in exchange for her soul, Millie attacks him with a hidden blade and manages to lock him in the attic. She takes his phone and reads messages from his mother that confirm the man's obsession with perfection, and his mother's approval is the source of his many twisted compulsions. She begins a psychological counter-siege, using the very heirloom dishes he cherishes as leverage to force him into a state of total, humiliating desperation. Millie demands that Andrew use a pair of pliers to pull out his own front tooth, mocking the very language of privilege he used to justify his abuse of both her and Nenah. She pours gasoline around the attic door, threatening to burn him alive if he does not comply, and watches on the monitor as the once powerful man mutilates himself in a fit of terror. As she prepares to leave him there to rot, Nenah returns to the house, and the two women's paths cross in the final, violent confrontation with the monster they both shared. Andrew manages to break out of the attic and attempts to kill Millie, but she fights back with a ferocity that forces him down the stairs toward a waiting, resolute Nenah. In a final act of defiance, Nenah rejects Andrew's pathetic pleas for a fresh start, telling him that his entire life is a hollow lie built on the suffering of others. She pushes him over the banister to his death and carefully stages the scene to look like a tragic accident, ensuring that the law will finally be on her side. Nenah tells Millie to flee before the police arrive, acknowledging that Millie has done more for their freedom than any court of law ever could. In the aftermath, a female police officer who had her own history with Andrew's previous victims chooses to look the other way, officially ruling his death an accident and closing the book on his reign of terror. Andrew's funeral is a somber affair where his mother laments the loss of his perfect smile, unaware that her son died as the monster he truly was. Nenah, now the sole heir to Andrew's vast estate, meets with Millie one last time to provide her with the financial means to start a new life and a clean slate. However, Millie's journey does not end with a simple retirement. She has found a new calling in the shadows of the domestic world she once inhabited. The story concludes with Millie arriving at yet another wealthy home for an interview, this time recommended by Nenah to a woman who carries the telltale bruises of a familiar abuse. Millie enters the house not as a victim or a simple servant, but as a guardian and an equalizer, ready to help another woman find the same violent, necessary freedom she and Nenah fought so hard to achieve.